I, 26, female, have been engaged to my fiancé, who we'll call Jeff, 26, male, for about 2 months. I met him through a dating app 4 years ago, and we've been inseparable since then. And Jeff and I are soulmates. He is the only person in my life who has never let me down. I haven't had an easy life. My parents got divorced when I was 2 years old. My dad walked out on us, and he never looked back. He did pay child support, but that was about it. He never bothered to actually come meet me or see how I was doing. My mom, 48, female, was also not a great mother, to be honest. She was more involved in other activities when I was younger rather than actually raising me. I was practically raised by nannies or babysitters when I was slightly older. My mother was really young when she had me, and her priorities were really different. She didn't care much for being a mother, and mostly spent her time going out with friends or on dates. She was an out and out socialite and didn't have time for me. Even career wise, she wasn't very serious about her job. She was a freelance artist and she would make decent money every month, but she didn't have to worry about me because she would have the child support paychecks coming in to make sure everything was covered. I hate to say it, but I'm pretty sure that had not been for the child support money, she would have kicked me out a long time ago. She was never particularly attached to me, and I mostly felt like she was waiting for me to grow up so I could leave her alone. And then, when I was around 13 years old, she started seeing my stepfather. My stepfather, let's call him Matt, 50, male, also had a daughter my age, and we'll call my stepsister Jess. When we first started dating and my mother brought his family home for the first time to introduce us to each other, she told me to be on my best behavior and said that this was really important for her. Now, she had brought home my boyfriend thousands of times before that, but she had never cared about the way I behaved. She would usually just inform me that she had guests coming over, and I would take it as a signal to go in my room and stay there until they left. But this time, I felt like she was serious about the guy, because otherwise she wouldn't have cared about my behavior. Let me phrase it better. She wouldn't even have cared about my existence in the house had she not been serious about Matt. The first time I met him and his daughter, they were relatively nice to me, and it was a nice first meeting. I had no idea what was about to hit me after that first meeting. Soon after, he started coming over more frequently, and after a certain point, it was like they had practically moved in together. I didn't mind it. It wasn't like it was disturbing me in any way, so I had no reason to care about them as long as they just let me get on with my life. It was that way for a long time. They were practically living together, and occasionally Jess would come over as well. Her mother was still a part of her life, so she would spend half of the month at her mom's place. Initially, they were either decent to me or they would just ignore me. I was honestly okay with it because I didn't particularly care for any of them. I didn't even care about my mother, so it was really difficult for me to care about people associated with her. All I wanted was my own peace and quiet, and for a while I had that. But then they decided to make it a permanent thing and actually moved in together. Now, I wouldn't even have cared about that, but my mom told me that now that they were moving in together, I had to start sharing my room with my stepsister. I put my foot down then, and I told him that I was not going to do that because it was my room. It had been my room all my life, and that was the only thing that brought me peace, that in that house I had a corner all to myself. I wasn't going to compromise my freedom by sharing my room with someone I barely even knew. And I told my mother that I was not going to share my room. We had a massive argument about it, and she told me that she would kick me out of the house if I didn't do as she said. I was 14 at the time, and I might have been young, but I still knew the law. I felt like I had to because my mother was the kind of person who you really couldn't trust. Also, it's just common sense, and I knew that she couldn't actually kick me out until I was an adult, or she could get in trouble with the law. So I told her that I knew that she couldn't do it and she was bluffing. She was frustrated, but she had to let me have my room and instead decided to turn the basement into the room that Jess would have. It wasn't exactly a bad place to have. It was just not as nice as my room, but my mom made a real effort to beautify it and make it habitable. By the time she was done with it, it looked just as nice as any other room in the house. So I didn't even know what the big deal was, but for some reason, that is around the time that Jess started hating me. It might have got something to do with the fact that the day that she moved in with us, my mom gave them the house tour and made it a point to announce to everyone that Jess had to live in the basement because I was not ready to share my room. I didn't understand why she would announce something like that, and to date, I can't think of the reason why she would do it. Maybe she wanted me to feel guilty about it by announcing it in front of Jess, but all it did was make me feel kind of weird and uncomfortable. It made me feel embarrassed for her, but I didn't feel sorry for putting my foot down. Or maybe she just wanted drama and wanted Jess to know that I had refused to share my room with her, which would inevitably lead to problems between us because Jess didn't seem like the kind of girl who would let something like this go. My mom was right about it. Jess didn't let it go, and after that day, she started treating me like the enemy. She would still spend half the month with her mother, but the days that she would be living with us were nothing short of awful for me. She was a menace to society, and she really had it in for me. She would be mean to me constantly and make horrible remarks about me right to my face. Just to give you guys an idea of the kind of things that she would tell me, she once said that the reason my dad had left my mother was probably because of me. And then she laughed about it like it was hilarious. She would make digs at my appearance since I was slightly chubby at the time. She would also make fun of me for no reason at school. Jess had a whole clique of mean girls at school, and she would never pass up on the opportunity to bully me with her cronies. Earlier, she and her friends would usually just ignore me, and I preferred that. She and I were never friends, but that was far better than being her enemy. The saddest part was that I hadn't even done anything to her. She was just offended that I didn't want to share my room with her. It was like a really silly reason to hate me so much and try to make my life a nightmare. My room was my safe space, and with a mother like mine, I think nobody can blame me for wanting to have some space of my own. Besides, if any of them had ever put in any effort into actually getting to know me, I might have shared my room with her. But she was a stranger to me, and I didn't feel comfortable giving up my freedom for her. I never complained about it to my mother or Matt because they knew about it and it was pointless to say anything to them. They didn't care about it. I could get bullied all my life and they would still turn a blind eye to it because I wasn't important to them. So I just had to put up with it and let her walk all over me. I would fight back occasionally, but I soon learned that all that it did was escalate the argument and our parents would get involved and I would end up getting grounded because, of course, they hated me. She would always just cry a little and get out of trouble, but I couldn't cry on command like her, and I certainly wasn't that manipulative. So I would be the one who got reprimanded for my bad behavior and was told that I needed to start treating Jess like my sister while she got off scot-free and I had to face the music. It was a horrible place to grow up in, and I hated my life. So when, around my 18th birthday, I finally got kicked out, I was actually more relieved than anything. I had put up with my family's insanity for years before I got kicked out, and it only got worse with time. Jess continued to be a nightmare to deal with, and our parents continued to support her without ever questioning the validity of whatever she was doing. In the course of 4 years, she had managed to turn our entire year in high school against me, and I barely had a couple of friends who would even talk to me. Everybody else hated me because she did, and that was enough of a reason. It had taken a toll on my mental health, and I was struggling to keep up in every aspect. I had gained a lot of weight because I was binge eating like crazy, and that had drastically altered my appearance for the worse. I was fat, struggling with acne, and my hair was also really bad. I was also struggling to keep up my grades, so not only did I look bad, but I also seemed to be dumb to everybody else. I literally had nothing going on for me, and I was at an all-time low. Things at home were no better either because I still had to deal with Jess and my parents. My mother had become increasingly insufferable and would constantly compare me to Jess in spite of knowing that she was the one who had made my life so much worse than it was before. Things were bad before my mom got married to Matt and they moved in together, but they weren't this bad. Yeah, it was kind of upsetting that my mother didn't care about me before, but after her marriage with Matt, I went from the frying pan into the fire. She went from not caring to actively making me feel bad about myself, and it felt like I was living with mean girls at home as well. It couldn't be more obvious to me that Jess was the daughter that my mother had actually wanted, but instead, life had dealt with the wrong cards and she got stuck with me. I know that both of them wanted nothing more than for me to be gone, and honestly, I wanted the same thing as well. My mother and Jess hated me, and Matt didn't care. I had no family to speak of other than my mother, since my grandparents were not in touch with us. I had never known my father, and so I didn't know about my other set of grandparents either. I literally had nowhere to go, and I felt weird asking my friends for help, so I just had to tough it out and stay with my mom so that I would at least have a roof over my head and food to eat every day, at least until I turned 18. But then, a couple of weeks before my birthday, an incident took place and I was kicked out that very day. So it was a weekend, and I still remember it as if it happened yesterday because it was one of the most traumatic and stressful days of my life. Around that time, we had both just graduated and she had started hanging out with a larger group of people. She had a friend whose brother was in his last year of college and she was dating her brother, so she and her friend would hang out with his friends, who all happened to be kind of older than us. I knew all about the kind of things that they would get up to, but I didn't think that it was worth bringing it up with my parents because with my luck, it would probably just backfire. So I never told anybody about the fact that she had started drinking, and even though I couldn't prove it, I knew that she was smoking weed and stuff. I was never into any of it because, first of all, I never had friends who were cool enough to have access to alcohol and cigarettes, let alone drugs. And secondly, I was already struggling with my weight and grades. I didn't need to add alcohol and drugs to the mix. I had enough on my plate as it is. But that day, I think I must have left my room unlocked before I went for a shower, and the next thing I knew, I heard banging on the bathroom door, and my mother was screaming at me, demanding that I come out right now. I had to hurry and put on my clothes so I could check out what she was going on about. When I came out of the shower, my mother, Matt, and Jess were waiting in my room, and all of them had really serious looks on their faces. My mother brought out a bunch of empty beer bottles from under my bed, and even more incriminating than that, there was a huge plastic bag containing I don't even know how many grams of weed in it. Now, I knew that it didn't belong to me, and so did Jess, but my parents didn't know that. I guess somehow she had planted it in my room when I was not there and then told my mom about it, and they started freaking out at me, screaming at me about what a horrible person I was. She didn't just scream at me about the alcohol and the drugs, but also started going off on me about how I was a total disappointment to them. She complained about me eating all the food. She said that I was a waste. She was sure that I was not even going to become anything worthy in the future, and that I would just continue to live with them and waste their money. I tried to tell her several times that none of it belonged to me, and that I didn't even know how it ended up in my room, but she didn't buy it. She lost it when I suggested that maybe Jess just placed it in my room to get me in trouble. She started screaming at me about how I was always jealous of her and I would never be as good as her at anything, which is why I was trying to shift the blame. I was crying like crazy by that point, but even then, she didn't seem to care and continued to yell at me. After some time, she stopped screaming at me and said that I had to go. I didn't know what she was talking about, and I asked her where I was to go, and she told me that she didn't care when I went, but she just wanted me out of the house because she was done dealing with me. When I said that I wasn't going to go anywhere, she told me that she would call the cops on me since I was almost 18 anyway. They were going to take the drug charges very seriously. She told me that she didn't want an addict living with her and using all her money and resources, and that I had to look out for myself now because she was done playing happy family with someone who didn't even deserve it. I kept begging her not to kick me out because even though I wanted to leave, I knew that I had nowhere to go and I didn't have enough money of my own. But my mother simply didn't care, and she told me that if I didn't clear out within that day, then she really would call the police, and she herself would report me to them. I was stunned that she was capable of being so heartless, and even more so that neither Matt nor Jess had any complaints about this. They were literally just going about that day as if nothing was going on. After a considerable amount of crying and begging, I actually started packing my things because between getting arrested for possessing drugs and living on the streets, I would gladly take the latter. I was done packing by the evening, and when I left the house, nobody said goodbye to me, and I never turned around either. I went to the park and sat on the bench there for a couple of hours, but then started getting really cold, so I decided to head over to a friend's place to spend the night there, hoping that they would allow me. I went to my best friend's place, Amy, and asked her if I could stay with her for a couple of days, as she already knew how my parents were, and I didn't have to explain much to her. I told her the events of that day, and she was scandalized. She told me that her parents could help me if I would just let them. I had always told her never to tell anybody about the way my parents treated me, including her parents, because I didn't even know if people would believe me, and I guess I felt weird sharing these personal details of my life with others. But that day, she forced me to tell everything to her parents, and they were just as horrified as Amy had been. They got on a call with my mother and tried to speak to her, but it didn't help at all, and she was quite rude to them. So they realized that talking to her wouldn't make the situation any better, and then they did something that I don't think I can ever thank them enough for. They told me that I could live with them for as long as I had to, and that they would support me. They were rich enough, so money was not a problem. And Amy loved me, so she was ready to share a room with me. I spent the next couple of years living with them, attending community college because that's the only place I got accepted due to my bad grades. I started working and saving money to find a place of my own, but Amy's parents made sure that I never felt the pressure to move out of their house and made me as comfortable as they could. And then about 3 years ago, I had finally saved enough to move out. I was proud of myself, and at the same time, I was really grateful to Amy and her parents. I really couldn't have done it without them. Even on the day that I moved out, they were the ones who helped me settle into my new place and told me that I was welcome back any time I wanted to visit them or even live with them. That was the turning point of my life. I had lost a lot of weight by then, and my health was much better. I felt better, and I looked it as well. I was also earning enough to support myself, and I had spent enough time working hard on myself, so I decided to start dating as well because I wanted to get married eventually, and I had to start looking. I met a couple of guys before Jeff, but it always fizzled out before it could really get somewhere. And after I met Jeff, I finally understood why. It was because Jeff and I were meant to be together, and all the other guys that I met before him were just meant to be fun, but nothing more than that. When I started dating, I didn't know that he was rich and was the heir to his dad's company. I just really liked him because he was funny and cute, and he seemed to really like me too. After dating for a couple of months, he told me about his family, and I realized that they owned a chain of restaurants that he was going to inherit in a couple of years after his father retired. Now, a lot of people might think that knowing how rich he was might have changed things for me and stuff like that, but honestly, I just still saw him as the same person that I had known before. That knowledge didn't change anything for me, and I loved him just as much as I had before. We moved in together after about a year of dating, and he had introduced me to his family a couple of months before that. Everybody in his family really liked me and we all got along well. Everything was just perfect. And so recently, when he asked me if I wanted to marry him, the answer came to me quite easily. We have been engaged for 2 months now and things have been going super well. But then, about 2 weeks ago, I received an email from Jess. Now, we haven't spoken in almost 8 years and I haven't heard from my family ever since I got kicked out. I didn't know why she would reach out to me now, especially to make amends. I think enough time had passed and neither of us cares enough to even try and fix the situation anymore. So when I read that email and realized that she was reaching out to me to apologize for everything that had happened in the past and acknowledge that she had been a total nightmare, I was really confused. She actually admitted to planting everything in my room because she wanted me to get kicked out, since she just hated me for no reason. I had no idea why she would be confessing all of that so many years later, and I knew that there was something off about this whole thing. The timing was also suspicious because I had just gotten engaged, and I knew that she must have known about it because I had posted about it on social media, and we did go to the same high school, so some people must have told her about it. Everything seemed very suspicious, so I decided to do some digging. On doing so, I found out that the guy that Jess was married to happened to be the owner of the business that supplies plastic containers and stuff for takeaway orders to Jeff's restaurants. It was quite easy for me. All I had to do was make a fake profile and stalk her. And from there, I went on to her husband's page and he mentioned all about his work and his bio. So that was a relatively straightforward process. And I already knew a lot about Jeff's business because we had plans to run it together once his dad retired. So I was learning the ropes already. And when I noticed that this was the guy he was dealing with, I instantly told Jeff about it. Now, in the past couple of years, I have been doing my best not to think about my old life because I only wanted to move on. So I hadn't followed anybody from my family online. And I have also told my friends never to tell me any news about them. So I never knew that Jess was married now and had been for a few years. But when I found out that her husband was actually dealing with us, Jeff and I decided that we would cancel our contract. It was costing us a lot anyway. And more importantly, I don't think I could ever have anything to do with that woman again, not even in a business capacity. Jeff also told me that the quality of the products that he was being supplied by her husband had also decreased substantially from the beginning, and they had been considering dropping him as their supplier anyway, and had been in the talks with another guy with cheaper prices and better products. So last week, a couple of days after I received that email from Jess, Jeff decided to hold the meeting with her husband and cancel their contract. But for some reason, Jess believes that I did this on purpose to get her back and has been accusing me of that through her emails and social media posts. We haven't been in touch for almost a decade. But she still thinks I'm holding a grudge against her, which I might be, but that's not the real reason that her husband lost our contract. She made a post a couple of days ago and said that a lot of clients had been dropping them anyway, and since this was the last straw, she claims that I only did it out of spite, and apparently this was highly unprofessional of us. She tagged our Facebook page in her post and it's really messy now. I kind of feel bad for her because in her post she mentioned that she and her husband have been losing clients left and right. And all right, I'll admit that part of this was personal, but a lot of it was professional as well, and I don't think Jeff and his father would have dropped her husband as their supplier on just my word alone. Nevertheless, I feel kind of bad for her. AITA for making my fiancé stop working with my estranged stepsister's husband? Update 1. Okay, so Jeff has spoken to his dad's lawyers and his dad thinks we did the right thing, so we are going after them legally and demanding that they take down that post and pressing charges for defamation against them because the guy was charging us a bomb and delivering products below expectations. So if we were getting a better deal somewhere else, we were obviously going to go there. It's just by coincidence that I just happened to be married to the guy who ran that business. And instead of running their company better, she decided to run her mouth on social media to try and defame us. It's ridiculous how I even allowed myself to feel bad for her after everything that she had put me through. But you guys really opened my eyes, so thank you for that. A lot of you are really supportive, and I appreciate that. Thank you so much for all the comments. Update 2. So, Jeff and his father filed a defamation lawsuit against Jess and her husband a couple of days ago, and we are meeting with the court-appointed mediator in a week, maybe. But in the meantime, my mother has taken it upon herself to defend her poor little stepdaughter once again. It's so ridiculous. I feel like I'm back in high school. But thankfully, I'm not actually back in high school, and I can simply just turn a deaf ear to them now and ignore everything that they say. Because unlike then, I don't have to be in my mother's books to have a roof over my head. So she can cry about it all she wants, but it's not going to change anything. She has been trying to get to me for the last few days, ever since Jess was served, but I have just blocked her and moved on with my life. I don't need that sort of negativity around me. I'm engaged. I'm about to get married to the man of my dreams, and the last thing that I need is her or her crazy stepdaughter back in my life again. Update 3. Hey, so let me just fill you guys in quickly. First, we were able to win the defamation lawsuit. It wasn't even that hard because my father-in-law's lawyers are total sharks and they ended her and her husband. So yeah, maybe they'll focus more on their business now and actually live up to their clients' expectations. They had to pay out for whatever they said, and we were able to reach a settlement, so that's over now. And we can finally focus all our energy on planning our wedding. It's really exciting, and I can't wait to be married to Jeff. As I said, he is literally my soulmate, and I waited long enough to find someone like him. Now I finally have him. I'm never letting him go. Stay tuned for more stories from our girl relationships.